This has been unavailable for months, and right now it's finally back. And considering some of the things that are happening with our food supply right now, the timing couldn't be much better. If you've been waiting for a chance to add this to your food storage, this may be your window. But it's not the only food that I'm paying attention to right now. A brand new agricultural report just came out this week. And when you start putting those numbers together with what's happening with beef, eggs, grains, and some of the other pressures on our food system, there's several foods that I think are worth taking a second look at right now. Not because the grocery stores are going to be empty next month, but because when the warning signs start adding up like this, I would much rather secure the things my family already eats while they're available and affordable than wish I had later. Hey guys, it's Jera with Wicked Prepared. Today, I want to show you some of the foods that I am paying especially close attention to right now, why I'm watching them, and some of the things that I'm doing with my own pantry because of everything that's going on. And let's start with the one that's probably gotten more attention than just about anything else lately, beef. I've talked about beef quite a bit over the last year or so I'm not going to spend half of this video rehashing everything we've already talked about. I can link another video down below if you've missed all that, but the situation hasn't gone away. The latest USDA cattle inventory gives us a really interesting picture. As of July 1st, there were about 94.2 million cattle and calves in the United States. And overall, that's actually up slightly from last year. But when you dig into the numbers that matter for rebuilding the beef supply, things don't look quite as encouraging. The number of beef cows was down another 1% from last year to about 28.5 million head. And remember, that's coming on top of a U.S. cattle herd that's already been hovering around 75-year lows. The estimated calf crop for this year is down another 2%, and those calves are the future beef supply. That's one of the problems with beef. Rebuilding a cattle herd, it doesn't happen in 6 months. It takes time. Then there's another complication that's been hanging over the cattle industry, the New World screwworm. If you've been following this, then you already know the United States closed its southern ports to livestock imports because of the spread of screwworm in Mexico. And the USDA is planning to begin reopening the Douglas, Arizona port on August 24th, with every animal that comes through getting a full USDA inspection. But the other southern ports remain closed for now, and the USDA has said that that reopening schedule can change if the risk changes, so it's not for sure. Then, just this week, the latest USDA supply and demand report lowered its forecast for U.S. beef production for the remainder of this year. It also lowered projected beef production for next year. And at the same time, the USDA raised its forecast for beef imports for the remainder of this year because the domestic demand for beef remains strong. And so think about what all of that means together. We're still trying to rebuild our domestic beef herd. The calf crop is smaller. We have an animal health threat that's complicating cattle imports from Mexico. Domestic beef production forecast has been lowered, and we're relying more heavily on imported beef to help satisfy demand. And I've got another little thing I'm going to add in just a minute about the imported beef. None of this means that beef is going to completely disappear, but we have already seen what a tight beef supply can do to prices. And I don't think I have to spell it out for you, but all of these conditions that we're looking at today set us up for rising prices and tightening supply at the very least. And it's certainly enough to make beef something that I'm continuing to pay very close attention to, and I'm going to be bulking up my on-hand supply. And then there's another issue that's gotten some attention recently, recalls.
Where's the beef? That is what Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller and a lot of other people are wondering. That's after nearly 30,000 pounds of raw beef from Argentina was found to have entered the U.S. without going through a standard re-inspection process. And he worries that there may be more out there.
Somehow, this got through without being inspected. Now, that's concerning on two parts. That's 15 tons. That's 120,000 quarter-pound hamburgers. That's a lot of beef. Where's the beef? We don't know. We got to go find it. It's out there somewhere. More concerning is we've been doing this for a year. How much got through we didn't know about?
And he says we need to figure out how that happened and fix the problem. He says one way to do that is to increase the U.S. beef supply.
Well, we need to eat American beef and not be dependent on any foreign country to feed us. We risk losing all of our freedoms if we depend on other countries to feed us.
We recently saw almost 30,000 pounds of imported beef from Argentina recalled because it entered the United States without receiving the required federal import reinspection. Now, I want to be definitely very careful here because it wasn't recalled for being contaminated or making people sick or anything like that. The problem was just that the required import inspection, reinspection, hadn't happened. And I am certainly not saying that all beef coming from another country is automatically bad beef. There's definitely some incredibly high quality beef products that are produced all over the world. But imported beef does add another layer to that supply chain, and that's just one more friction point. It has to meet US import requirements, has to go through the appropriate inspections, and then it's going to make its way through an international transportation system before it can ever reach us. And this recall is a pretty good example of just one of the places where something could go wrong. I know a lot of you do prefer to buy American raised beef when you can, and especially when we're talking about something that we're putting into long-term food storage, knowing where it came from matters to me too. Which brings me back to what I talked about at the beginning of the video, and it makes the timing of all of this even better. Thrivalist freeze-dried ground beef, it had been unavailable. It was out of stock for months because there'd been such a run on it a little while back, but it's finally back in stock. I have been waiting for this one. This beef is sourced right here in the USA. And of course, we know that it's freeze-dried and packaged 100% in the USA as well. So huge bonus for that. If you want to check it out while it's still available, go to tryfreezedried.com/cans. You can also check out another of our favorite freeze-dried sources that is also 100% US sourced and produced and all of that. And that's Freeze-Dry Wholesaler. Because I found over the years that just like with any other type of food, I do not want to limit myself to just one brand or one store because I value variety and every company offers something different. They've got different items, they've got different packaging. There's things we love from each one. And Freeze-Dry Wholesalers has an incredible variety. If you want to go beyond ground beef, they've actually got 10 different varieties of ground meats, everything from turkey and lamb to venison and elk, completely incredible. Or if you want to move beyond ground beef, they also have a lot of other cuts of beef, both cooked and uncooked. They've got everything from strips to stew cubes to shredded beef to whole steaks, and it's all freeze-dried. It's incredible. If you want to check out all that variety, go to tryfreezedried.com/bags. And just remember to always use my coupon code WICKEDPREPARED for an extra discount anytime that you place an order from them. We also have a giveaway going on right now with them for some really incredible prizes. And I'm going to put some info down below where you can go find out more about that because it's a pretty awesome opportunity. But all in all, it's incredibly important for me that I can have American sourced ground beef that I can put right on my pantry shelf with a 25 to 30 year shelf life. It doesn't require refrigeration or electricity. So I don't have to worry about losing it if the power goes out or if the grid goes down. It's true food insurance. And ground beef is one of the meats that I do especially like for my long-term food storage because it is very, very versatile. Think about how many different meals you already make with ground beef. If you're like us, tacos, chili, spaghetti, casseroles, soup, sloppy joes, the list goes on and on. It's not some strange, weird survival food that you're only going to eat when the world ends. It's normal food. And freeze drying takes away one of the biggest vulnerabilities that comes with storing meat, the freezer. I mean, I've got meat in my freezer too. In fact, we get some really fantastic beef that's raised right here in the USA with no hormones, no antibiotics, get it delivered to our door every month, and we absolutely love it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with storing meat in a freezer for convenience, but that's not preparedness. If the power goes out for an extended period, suddenly you've got a clock ticking on everything in your freezer. Even if you've got a generator, it's not something that's foolproof or eternal. So freeze-dried ground beef, any freeze-dried meat for that matter, it can sit right on the pantry shelf for decades when it's stored properly, unopened. And I just love that peace of mind. Something to note is that Thrivalist also offers their ground beef in smaller pantry cans as well. They are the only ones in the industry who's offering that size can. I'm going to tell you why they've become so popular because I know what happens when we start talking about freeze-dried meat. A lot of people see the price on those big number 10 cans or especially a case of number 10 cans and they think, I can't afford to stock that because that can be a large purchase all at once for a lot of people. But you don't have to start there. Now there's another option that fits better for a lot of people. For a big family or for somebody who's seriously building their long-term storage in a hurry, those larger cans or cases, they can make a lot of sense and they do usually give you a little bit better value overall. But the pantry cans, they give people another option. You can buy just one or two smaller cans now and then one or two next month. They're especially really nice for smaller households because once you open that can, you don't have such a large amount to use up. And then little by little, you've got real beef sitting on your shelf that doesn't need electricity to stay good. So yes, I have been very excited that this beef is back. I'm definitely not the only one. And if beef was the only thing that was happening right now, maybe that would be the end of this video, but it's not. Of course it's not. Because something else caught my attention in those agricultural numbers that came out just a few days ago, and that was grains. The USDA released their newest World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate report just a few days ago. And that's one of the reports that gives us a look at what's happening with major crops and food commodities here in the United States and also around the world. Now, I'm not going to bore you with a whole bunch of numbers because I know what happens to my brain when somebody starts throwing a whole bunch of numbers at me. But there's something really important that I want you to understand about these numbers. We're not running out of grain. In fact, they are forecasting a 16 billion bushel US corn crop this year that would actually be the second largest corn crop on record, which sounds fantastic. But there's another side to those numbers. The USDA just lowered its expected corn yield by 2.3 bushels per acre. And at the same time, expected use increased. So projected ending stocks were cut by 137 million bushels. The USDA also raised the expected season average price that farmers are going to receive for corn. And this is where something that I have talked about before becomes really important. A food system can have plenty of food and still become more vulnerable. So think of it like your emergency fund, your money fund. Having money left in your bank account, it doesn't mean you're in trouble. But if you used to have $10,000 sitting in there and now you've got $1,000, it definitely means that that next unexpected expense matters a whole lot more. And food inventories work somewhat the same way. The smaller the cushion becomes, the less room there is for the next problem. A drought, a flood, a war, a transportation disruption, some kind of disease, export issues. Any one of these things becomes more significant when there's less excess supply sitting behind it. And there's another reason I pay attention to corn. We don't just eat grains ourselves. I don't actually eat a lot of corn myself, but we feed corn to animals, and I eat a lot of animal products. Corn is an enormous component of livestock and poultry feed, and soybean meal is another. So changes in feed availability and feed costs can eventually work their way through the system and into the cost of producing chicken, pork, eggs, even beef. Cattle aren't going to be raised exclusively on corn, obviously. Much of their lives they can be spent eating grass and forage, but grain does play an important role in conventional beef finishing, and when feed costs change, livestock producers feel it. So when I'm watching grain conditions, I'm not just thinking about cornmeal. I'm thinking about what happens further down the food chain. It's something that we might not see right away, but it's still very important to keep an eye on. And speaking of corn, there's something else that's worth knowing. According to the USDA, 92% of the corn acreage planted in the United States this year was planted with biotech varieties, which is a fancy way of saying GMO. 92%. So if avoiding genetically engineered corn matters to you, your options are obviously considerably narrower. And that's another place that Thrivalist comes to the rescue for our food storage. Their freeze-dried corn is non-GMO, which I absolutely love. So corn is something I'm watching, but there's another grain that I'm paying especially close attention to right now, and that's wheat. Overall, U.S. wheat ending stocks are currently projected to be 22% below last year. But when we break wheat down by type, there's one particular class that's especially interesting. If you've stored wheat berries before, you're probably familiar with all of these terms, but for anybody who hasn't or who isn't, here's the quick version. Hard red wheat is that traditional hearty bread wheat. It's higher in protein and gluten. It makes those traditional whole wheat breads and bread products. Hard white wheat is also a good bread wheat, but it's lighter in color. It's got a milder flavor, so it's basically your white whole wheat. I actually really like hard white for that reason. And then there's your soft white wheat. Soft white is lower in protein and gluten, so instead of being like your primary bread flour, it's going to be better for things like biscuits and cookies, pancakes, pastries. So think pastry flour, basically. But there's another word that you're going to sometimes hear attached to these different names, and that's winter. Hard red winter wheat. And that refers to the growing cycle. Winter wheat is planted in the fall, goes dormant through the winter, starts growing again, and it gets harvested the following year. And then spring wheat is planted in the spring and harvested that same year. And the reason I'm making that distinction is because one particular class, the hard red winter wheat, is taking an especially big hit this year. The USDA is currently forecasting the smallest U.S. hard red winter wheat crop since the 1950s. Drought across the Great Plains hurt the yields. Some acreage was abandoned rather than harvested. Hard red winter wheat is normally the largest wheat class produced in the United States. So when its supply gets squeezed, that's something we need to pay attention to. Now, this is not a situation where you need to panic and just buy every bag of flour you can find. In fact, if you're thinking about really long-term wheat storage, flour is not necessarily what I would buy anyways. I'd buy wheat berries. I do buy wheat berries. Whole wheat berries store much better long-term than flour. Once you grind that whole wheat berry into flour, it's much more exposed to oxygen. So the natural oils are going to begin to oxidize and they can go rancid. The flour doesn't store nearly as well long-term, and the nutrients start to decline, and some of those decline pretty quickly. And I have stored flour for a pretty long time without having any issues, but that can definitely depend on where you live, like how it's packaged, a lot of other things. So I consider flour more of a short to medium term pantry item. Definitely keep it rotated, but keep that wheat berry intact and properly stored, and you've got a fantastic long-term staple. Then you grind what you need when you need it, and you are getting fresher flour that's more nutritious, much more nutritious also. And you can also cook wheat berries whole, you can sprout them, you could even potentially grow wheat from viable berries if that ever became necessary. So you're storing something that is incredibly versatile. Now, I get asked a lot where the best place is to buy the whole wheat berries. Now, my favorite place to buy bulk wheat berries is Azure Standard. Now, I'm going to leave my link down below for anyone who's not already a member there, because if you've been meaning to put some more wheat into your long-term storage, this is honestly something that I would consider adding to an Azure order like right now. Find a drop near you where you can pick it up, because this isn't something that I'd personally want to pay to have shipped to my house, because depending on your family size, how much bread and wheat products you make, you probably are going to want like at least a 25-pound bag, maybe 50 pounds. 50 pounds is usually what I get, and the larger quantities do bring that per pound price down. But that's what's beautiful about Azure Standard, is you do have that option to have it shipped to a drop in your community and save a whole bunch on the shipping costs. And you don't necessarily have to choose hard red wheat just because that's what we're talking about here. Store the wheat that you're actually going to use. I store several different kinds because that gives me options, and you know I love options and variety. One thing to remember with Azure is that bulk wheat is generally going to arrive in a paper sack, a giant paper sack. So that's definitely not how I would leave it for long-term storage. You're going to want to transfer it. I transfer mine into something like Mylar lined buckets, 5-gallon buckets, or mason jars, depending on how much I'm putting away. If you don't want to deal with repackaging it yourself, I do also have a source that sells wheat that is already packaged up like that for long-term storage. And it's more expensive to buy it that way, but that's a trade-off that's worth it to some people. I'm going to leave all those options down below so that you can kind of take a look and figure out what makes sense for you. But there's one really important piece of equipment that you're going to need if you're going to store wheat berries, and that's a grain mill, because 50 pounds of beautiful wheat berries are not going to make you very much bread if you can't turn them into flour. And you could still cook them or sprout them, all those things, so they wouldn't be a total waste. So if you don't have a grain mill yet, you haven't been able to add that to your supplies, it doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't be buying the wheat. But you're probably going to want flour too. So I'm going to put a link below to the grain mill that I have, the one that I use. I'm also going to try to leave you a couple more budget-friendly options that still have some good reputations, good reviews. And of course, make sure you get a manual one too. If you're using your flour on the daily, it's going to be good to have something that's electric, because that's a lot easier. But in a disaster with the grid down, you're going to definitely need something manual. So whether you're buying wheat berries, corn, oats, pasta, rice, or other basic grains and cereals, this is one category that I personally want well represented in my pantry. And doing some bulking up now, while we have this window to do it, makes a lot of sense to me. Now, there's one more food that I think deserves some attention right now, and that's eggs. Eggs have given us quite a ride over the last few years. Prices went crazy, they spiked way up, and then they came down. We've dealt with bird flu, we've dealt with shortages, and right now, there's another big egg recall that's connected to a salmonella outbreak.
And the FDA has now raised this level of recall to its highest level, level 1, which means that if you eat these eggs, there is a possibility you could face serious health consequences or even death. It comes amid a surge in foodborne illnesses in the United States, which are up 400% over the past year.
As of the FDA's latest update at the time of this recording, 98 people across 17 states had been identified in the outbreak, and 26 of those people had been hospitalized. The recalled eggs were sold under several different brand names, including Kroger and Simple Truth. And again, this doesn't mean that all eggs are unsafe. It doesn't even mean that we're about to have another enormous egg shortage. But there's another piece of information in that brand new USDA report that caught my attention. They lowered the egg production forecast based on the latest production data, and they raised the egg price forecast for the remainder of this year, and they also raised the egg price forecast for the first half of next year. And that's enough for me to work on building up my supply of shelf-stable eggs, because when the price of the raw product goes up, eventually that can work its way into the price of the shelf-stable versions and other products that depend on eggs as well. And we definitely don't want to be stuck without those foods if we do run into another shortage. And this is another example of some really good timing, because there's a freeze-dried breakfast bundle that's on sale this month that actually has 2 cans of my favorite freeze-dried scrambled egg crystals in it. I use these all the time. And it also has freeze-dried shredded cheese and some omelet-ready freeze-dried veggies. So you get a whole suite of foods that work together to make real meals, which is a great way to build your pantry. I've already talked more about this bundle in my August stock up guide. I know a lot of you have already taken advantage of the sale because it's a really good one. So I'm not going to beat you over the head with it again, but I did just want to point out why I like having these kinds of foods beyond simply having emergency food. Eggs and cheese normally require refrigeration, but if you put them in a freeze-dried form, and suddenly you've got breakfast ingredients sitting on the pantry shelf that's not dependent on the refrigerator working. And I can use these now, and I do. That's important to me. I don't want to spend my money on food that I'm afraid to use because it is just for emergencies. If scrambled eggs are in my pantry, we're going to use them. Mr. Wicked Prepared loves being able to make scrambled eggs without cracking shells and dealing with the mess, especially when we're in a hurry. And I love them because I can make shelf-stable mixes that are truly just add water, not just add water, add eggs, add milk, and 3 other things. And the cheese has saved me more than once. If I open a bag of cheese that I've got in my fridge and I find the little spots of mold because I didn't use it fast enough, I don't have to scrap my recipe or run out to the store. I just grab the freeze-dried cheese, add a little cold water, let it rehydrate, and I keep right on cooking. And of course, these ingredients open up all kinds of possibilities for shelf-stable meals in a jar, which you know is my favorite. I just made a quiche meal in a jar with bacon, Swiss cheese, and caramelized onions. That was to die for. I will link that video down below if you need some recipe ideas or you just want to see how you can actually use some of these pantry ingredients and what they look like in action. And that's really the point. This isn't food that just sits there waiting for an apocalypse. It's food. We eat it. We rotate it. And if something does happen, we are already familiar with using it. Now, beef, grains, and eggs are 3 of the big things that I'm paying especially close attention to right now. But none of this is happening in a vacuum. There's a potentially very strong El Nino developing for later this year, which could change rainfall and temperature patterns in different agricultural regions around the world. And then you've got continuing geopolitical instability affecting things like energy and transportation and fertilizer, so many things. Food doesn't magically appear at the grocery store. The farmers need fertilizer, their equipment needs fuel, the food has to be processed and packaged and refrigerated in a lot of cases and transported. And sometimes it goes thousands of miles before it reaches us. So a disruption doesn't necessarily have to happen to the food itself to eventually affect the price that we're going to pay for that food. And that's really what I mean when I say I'm looking at the whole system rather than trying to predict one specific shortage. You've got cattle numbers and animal disease concerns. You've got tighter supplies in a lot of grains. You've got egg production and price concerns. You've got the weather. You've got energy. You've got geopolitical uncertainty. None of these things by itself means that we are facing a food crisis. And I don't know which one or if any is going to become the next big problem. But altogether, they remind me why I don't wait for a crisis to build my pantry. So here's what I'm doing. I'm not going to the grocery store and buying 15 years worth of flour. I'm not filling 6 freezers with beef because cattle numbers are down. And I'm definitely not suggesting that anyone goes out and spends money they don't have because somebody on YouTube said that there's a food crisis coming. But what I'm doing is I'm looking at the foods that my family actually eats, and I'm asking one really simple question. If this became significantly more expensive 6 months from now, is there a reasonable amount that I could buy today that we're going to use anyways? That's preparedness. Because we eat beef, so I want it stored in more than one way. Some in the freezer, some canned, and some freeze-dried that doesn't rely on electricity at all. And we eat eggs, so I want to make sure that I've got eggs in the refrigerator, but I also want shelf-stable eggs. I want shelf-stable canned and freeze-dried produce to help keep us in good nutrition, good things in our diet when we can't get the fresh or we can't afford the fresh or there's a recall and it's potentially unsafe. And because we eat things like rice and pasta and oats and grains, they're part of our diet. So I want to make sure those are represented too. Maybe this is the month you add that 25 or 50-pound bag of wheat berries that you've been meaning to buy, wanting to buy. Maybe you finally get that grain mill. Maybe it's 1 or 2 small cans of freeze-dried ground beef. It doesn't have to happen all at once. Add an extra bag or a couple of cans. Take advantage of a sale. You can always find the most current sales and coupon codes for the best long-term food sources at tryfreezedried.com. So use that as a resource. Go there now, bookmark it, sign up for the notifications right on the page, because you never know when that next big discount is going to drop. And that can take a huge chunk off of your cost of stocking up and preparing for your family. You can also text me. I'll put my info on the screen down below, and I'll send you a text anytime I see a new sale or get a new coupon code to give out. It's a free service we offer, and it really does help a bunch. Pinch a little bit, a few dollars somewhere in your budget, and put that money towards your family's food insurance, because that's really what this is. It's insurance for disasters. It's insurance for hard times. It's insurance for those months when the grocery budget gets squeezed, and maybe even insurance for retirement when we're living on a fixed income and we're really glad that we put some of this food away when we could. Preparedness doesn't have to happen in one enormous shopping trip. The people who build the strongest pantries are usually the ones who just keep doing it little by little, month after month, until one day you take a step back and you realize that if something happens, you've got options. And that's what it's all about. That's what this is really all about, options. I don't know exactly what beef prices are going to do 6 months from now. I don't know what the next agricultural report is going to say. I don't know exactly what El Nino is going to do. And neither does anybody else, but I don't need to know, because the best time to prepare for a food shortage is not when the shelf is already empty. The best time to prepare for higher prices is not after the price has already doubled. And the best time to build a pantry is not when everybody else suddenly decides that they need to do it too. It's now. While the food is sitting right there, it's available, while we still have choices. It's certainly not getting any cheaper. And we still have an opportunity to put a little bit away right now. That's the window that I'm paying attention to. And there's some really, really good opportunities in that window. Remember, you don't have to buy what I'm buying. Look at your family. Look at what you actually eat. Look at what you already have and fill in the holes that make sense for you, because none of us can predict what's going to hit us next. We have learned that lesson the hard way, but we can definitely make sure that we are a little more ready for it. And that's all we can do. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a cow emoji down in the comments. Do not forget to check out the description box below the video for all the different resources that I mentioned today, along with links to all the lowest prices, any coupon codes that I might have for our viewers to use. And I'm going to leave another video right up here for you to watch next. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.